President Bwala Tinubu was sworn into office on the 29th of May, 2023. Now, after that, the president, as it is constitutionally required, nominated his ministers from the 36 states of the Federation and the FCT. And upon assumption of office as ministers, the president charged the ministers to be focused and diligent so as to deliver on his renewed hope agenda. Now, it's more than 6 months later. How has the ministers fared in keeping up with the promises of President Bwala Tinubu? Tonight, we dissect the more than 6 months of President Tinubu's ministers in security, economy, infrastructure, healthcare, education, solid minerals, just almost every one of them. And for that, I am being joined by Daniel Bwala. He's a lawyer and policy analyst. He joins me virtually from Abuja. Good to have you join us.
Right, thank you. But I joined from London.
Oh, you're joining from London. All right. Good to have you join us. Noted. We will correct that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And good evening to your viewers.
Thank you. All right. So let's get into it. There is a saying that goes, you can judge how well things are going from very early signs. Are things going well, in your opinion?
Yes, the answer. And yes, because when the president took the oath of office, everybody in Nigeria and everyone who has interest in Nigeria would have noticed that the situation that Nigeria was in was terrible. Terrible in the sense that we had hydra-headed insecurity, in every direction. We had the problem of the economy, which was tearing people. Because if you recall, it was the build-up to the election that led to the scarcity of the naira, which affected the market. And then we have all other areas of the economy, the security, agriculture, whatever it is. The situation on Nigeria at the time was bad. And the president ordinarily would have taken the side of comfort, but he decided to do what is the inevitable. Something if you don't do now, it will hurt you later, which is to take bold decisions for economic reform. And he was very frank about it when he addressed the nation. He said he knows it's a difficult decision. He knows it will be hard on the people, but that this is a job he has asked for. He accepted or inherited both the asset and the liability and is committed to doing the work. From that first speech to today, I have not come across any speech of the president where he tries to deflect attention, but I've seen a lot of the ministers trying to deflect attention. The principal has not, because he's committed to the delivering on the promise. His social contract with Nigeria was, documented in that book called the Renewed Hope Agenda. And so why I say we are doing well is because the first few months of his government looked like we went to hell. But everybody is seeing the gradual, return of the economic strength of the country, especially with the strategic move that the president has taken through the ministers concerned to deal with the naira, for example. The decision to remove fuel subsidy, which was criticized at the beginning, has resulted in the positive in the sense that it has given us increased revenue in every ramification, from which the president was able to touch on every state of the federation by increasing the federation allocation, federation allocation to both states and the local government. And that was adjudged by economists to have said that even though the country is going through hard time, the Nigerian people are having economic problem, but the federating units are having what we call the oil boom, because they have had over 300% of the increase as a result of the removal of fuel subsidy. So, and the states that are serious have already begun implementing policies that is helping their people. So in a nutshell, we can say that the president is doing well. But when we go further to probably critically assess the various fragments, because if you look at Section 5, the president has the powers of the executive of the federation, but he carries that function, according to Section 5, by himself or through the vice president or through the ministers of the government of the federation or through the agencies. So every head of an agency, department, or ministry that carries out an act, it is deemed as if it is the president carrying out that act. This is why the function of a minister is very, very serious. Because if the minister fails, it will be deemed as though it is the president that has failed. And I believe that was what informed his decision to come up with this idea of key performance indicators, which is helping in checkmating the activities of the ministers. You
have said that this administration is doing well, coming from what seems like an upheaval to some level of stability we're seeing now. But how well or how much has the ministers, over 40 of them, contributed to what we're seeing now, that stability?
So there are people who, depending on who you're talking with, if you're talking with the fiercest critics of the government, their assessment, their positive assessment or positive review would only touch on not more than 3 or 4 ministers, because that is the immediate impact that you will see. I'm talking about fiercest critics. So they would look at, for example, the Minister of the Economy. And at the beginning, he received a lot of bashing. But because of the economic recovery which we are experiencing, he can be considered as doing well. If you look at, let's say, for example, the security, and that is without mincing words. And I'm saying, if you're listening to the fiercest critics, they will tell you, if depending on who you're speaking about, whether you're speaking about heads of agencies or whether you're speaking about the ministers. But security-wise, you would have noticed, and the fiercest critics would have noticed, we have now experienced a marked progress. All of the kids that were abducted or kidnapped have all been returned. Most of whom, if not all, no ransom was paid. We're beginning to turn the tide. So depending on the specifics, but if you ask the fiercest critics, this is what they will tell you. Now, this is where the performance, the key performance indicator is necessary, because it has a 3-pronged approach. The third layer is one that could involve the fiercest critics, because the engagement of Nigerians, it is citizen feedback. And it is important in KPI because the only way you can assess whether a policy is working, it is by the feedback you get from the customers. And in this case, the customers are the Nigerian people. There is also the ministries stating a case for themselves. And I cannot see any ministry that will say we are not doing well. Everybody will want to say we're doing well. The third one are the external assessors, otherwise called, you can refer to them as external auditors. People who now invigilate the exams, the invigilators. They will give their own perspective about what the ministry is saying and about the feedback coming from the Nigerian people. And that will be, it will be placed in contradistinction with the objectives that were stated right from the beginning, the bond for which everybody signed. After all is said and done, the judge in this case will be the president, because systems can be compromised, systems can be manipulated, but the arbiter, who is the president, will know. Even if a minister by the system's manipulation is proven to have done well, the president will know whether you have done well or not. And in this case, he has the powers to exercise. Whether you perform well, he can ask you to go. You may not have performed, he can decide to ask you to stay, or he can decide to strictly abide by the performance that is indicated in the objective that is set out for the minister. So these are the key. But let me, if you permit me, let me say something that is very important, because when you talk of assessment of ministers, it is the way it is perceived, especially from the ministers. They tend to think as if it is adversarial. Every minister that is hardworking should be excited about that, because it gives you the opportunity to hear from your principal and employer that you have done well, based on result that is touchable, seeable, feelable, and in every ramification. You see, because in advanced countries, KPI are assessed by system and softwares, where there is no human element that can manipulate it. And the systems, the software works in a way that it is data that works. So if you have not done anything, the data will show. But when you have a combination of systems and then the human factor is where a lot of consideration can come in, which is why I made the case that the president at the end of the day will know, even if, for example, you push away. I give you an example of
Mr. Bwala, sorry to butt in. I want to get to that KPI in just a moment, because for a lot of people, it is quite expedient to begin to look at those who have performed and those who haven't. But I also wanted to ask, a very critical question, because you mentioned that renewed hope agenda of the president earlier. Are there indications, that some of these ministers understand, or how well would you say that these ministers understand the president's agenda and are executing it?
So, because like the way in law, in one judgment of the court that I think Lord Esther, who said even the devil cannot know the intention of man. You cannot tell whether somebody perfectly understands the KPI But if you want to judge his understanding on the basis of his performance, which is the right thing to do, then you can make a fair assessment, perception, whether this person understands it or not. This is my take. A minister who understands the key performance indicators, he knows his objectives, he knows what he can point out and say, these are the deliverables. And he knows that this and only these are the yardstick for which will be measured. That minister will be able to identify what he needs to do. 2, he will go about doing it. 3, he will communicate what he's doing in a language that a woman in a limo show will understand, a man in the boardroom will understand, because the essence of the functionality of a minister is to break down the policy of the president in a way that the common man on the street will be able to understand. And in communicating what your plans are, you will realize that quite a number of ministers, and I'm not saying that to derogate anybody, have not been able to have a firm grasp of what exactly is the intention of the president. And because there is no firm grasp of that, they are not able to communicate effectively in the performance of their duty. So if you ask the general public, what is your assessment? The Nigerian people, somebody will say it is only 3, it is only 5, it is only 11 ministers that are functioning. If you say, why are you saying that? They will point at what they believe to be the objective of that ministry and whether or not the president is performing or not. So I give you an example. Say power. Now, you don't have to go to Harvard Law School, Harvard Business School, or to go to Yale or Cambridge to understand the details of power. You know, sometimes, like the economy, when people start blowing the economic grammar, you even get confused. But you can break down economy if you're able to demonstrate how that policy can bring food on the table. So the same thing with power now. Whatever grammar you say, the Nigerian people who are the customers will understand what is the objective of the power ministry when they measure, for example, the availability of electricity that will help in driving the economy, in meeting with the needs of the family and meeting their needs. Now, even if the policy is going very well, and then I give you an example, Band A will pay a certain amount. Band A is supposed to get electricity from 18 hours to 22. Band A is charged, Band A is paying the money, but Band A gets less than 5 hours of electricity. That means there is question to answer. In our practice of law, they will not say you're guilty, but they will say you have a question to answer. Now, in the area of the economy, you can see the performance of the economic minister. Now, even if you hate him or you don't like him, the synergy between the minister of the economy and the central bank governor, the synergy, and then lately with the participation of the national security advisor in dealing with Binance, dealing with money fraud through the cyberspace, you have now seen how this trio are able to deal with the Naira problem. We have had 2-3 weeks of sustained gain of the Naira. The critics can say all they want. What we know is that there is a sustenance. So you can spread that across all facets of ministry. There are some ministers from that day, they were inaugurated till today. We don't even know whether they are in Nigeria or they are not in Nigeria.
And that's the point, Mr. Bwala, because Nigerians are also talking about why visibility might not be a proof of effectiveness, but some ministers are more visible than others. In fact, some are not even just visible at all. Do you think that there are ministers who seem totally out of their depth in the office they occupy?
Yes, I agree with you that visibility is not a proof, but I will make the case that service delivery is the proof. Because the Nigerian people are the customers. In fact, the president said it in his inaugural speech to the ministers. He said the Nigerian people are the customers. So the feedback from the customers, service that is delivered to the customer, will definitely be the proof of whether there is a performance from that ministry or not. I agree with you. There are some ministers that have mastery of the media. They make lots of noise, but there is actually nothing on ground. I also agree there are those who are highly effective, but they are not very good in communication. So you find that. But I don't think it's an excuse for any minister of the Federation to lack the voice to communicate the vision. It says, write the vision, make it plain upon tables, so that he that sees it will run with it. If you do not define what you intend to do as a minister in a way that the people will understand and run with it, And we're talking about ministers. You know that every minister has a number of agencies or departments under him. And if the minister does not provide a direction, how can the departments under him provide that direction? Let me say this. President Bwala Tinubu, I was just studying that recently. If you look at the economic policy of Rishi Sunak of the United Kingdom and juxtapose it with the economic policy of President Bwala Tinubu, I'm talking about numbers and perception of the economy. President Bwala Tinubu has done more than Rishi Sunak of the UK. But you see, we have a psyche problem, or sometimes we have a neo-colonial thinking where we think that anybody from the West has done excellently well, somebody from the other part of the world has not done it well. Given the problem that President Bwala Tinubu encountered, if you carry the same problem to some of the leaders in the First War, you will find that a lot of them may not be able to do half of what he has done. But the president would have done much more better if half of the engine are functioning optimally, which is why, in my view, the president has given opportunity. He said, when we give people appointment, we must support them. And I see the president everywhere supporting. I go through the news, a particular minister will say, this is what they need to carry out their work. The president approves it. So everything you need to function will be provided, but you don't have any excuse.
And that's what I was asking Mr. Bwala, if you think that some of these ministers are out of their depth. Do we is it that, there are cases where there are square pegs in round holes and round pegs in square holes?
Yes, there are. And there would always be. And in every country of the world. So let us not make it look like it is only in Nigeria, in Africa, or in the government of President Bwala Tinubu. A political leader and a president who comes to office works with two things. One is faith, and the other one is works. Sometimes the judgment he makes on a minister is based on faith. He probably has not known whether the person can perform or not, but he chose the person and give the person trust. It's up to you to prove your trust or you lose the trust. And then sometimes the choice will be based on works. He doesn't even have the time to look at whether he should have faith in you or not, but he has seen that you have the capacity to perform and he gave you the job. As they wore in to begin to function, those who faith were reposed on them will have to go extra mile to prove that there is a competence to back it up. Those whose the decision of the president was made purely based on works and their performance, more than often, you find them achieving because right from the beginning, the decision was made based on their performance. And in politics, a lot of factors come into play in the appointment that the president makes. The appointment can be strategic, politically, or it can be strategic economically, or it can be strategic security-wise, or it can be strategic for the purposes of balancing the government in such a way that the polity will be quiet and not to have a problem. And so when all of these things are consideration for making appointment, you find out that there are people in good faith you'll appoint, but unfortunately may not be able to have that. But I want to point out something that is important, and I think that we need to make it. You see, you can akin what the president is talking about to football. And I'm a diehard Chelsea fan. I can illustrate that. There are reasons and factors that will lead a coach to change players in the course of a game. 3 factors. Number 1, it can be based on strategy. Many years ago, a Chelsea defender was being dribbled by a striker. The coach knew that he had to remove him, not just because they need to save the match, but they also need to preserve the person's life. He was gasping for breath. These are some ministers that may have been given appointment but have no capacity. Now, 2, the appointment might also be made based on the change of tactics as you go on. So you could do 4-4-2 as a formation, which is quite, conservative. But if you don't have much time as a political leader, you have to change tactics and probably use 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. So this, which is highly, an attacking formation in football match. So all of these things can be variable. So the fact that a minister is removed does not mean he's a devil. Sometimes it is the change of the tactics that will now require that somebody will be removed. Sometimes it could be your non-performance. Sometimes it could be fatigue, father time has come of the person. You can't innovate. You don't have idea to be creative. And at other times, it might be that you came thinking that you are made a minister to amass wealth. So you didn't pay attention to the functions and the duties committed into your hands. You are busy chasing money. And then at the end of the day, it backfires. All of these things are factors. And that is the reason why I believe that the president created this scenario where he can ask you to go. Not that everybody is appointed till after 4 years, because they may end up destroying the legacy that you are trying to establish.
Mr. Bwala, we have to take a break now just to let Nigerians get a breather. And then when we return, we'll look at some specific ministries and then outstanding initiatives you've seen in the last almost a year now of the president's administration. Stay with us, everyone.